Hello, friends. The Bible repeatedly shows us that true faith is not tied to a place. It's not dependent on comfort, freedom, or favorable circumstances. In Daniel chapter 1, Jerusalem represents stability, the good old times, a life of familiar rhythm, simple pleasures, trusted relationships, and spiritual security. It is life lived close to the temple. Unfortunately, times change. The precious elements of life in Jerusalem disappear. Security is lost. The familiar world collapses. What to do? Our text opens with a powerful contrast. Jerusalem becomes the lost home, a symbol of biblical tradition, identity, and a spiritual assurance. Babylon, on the other side, can be considered as exile, pressure, uncertainty, and a culture that does not honor God. Prophet Daniel and his friends are suddenly placed in a foreign environment. They struggle to adapt. Many details of daily life become disturbing and challenging for all of them. The key question of this chapter is not political, it's not merely historical, it is the question of a deeply personal relationship. Can a person remain faithful to God both in Jerusalem and in Babylon? Daniel chapter 1 gives us a clear and encouraging answer. Before Daniel becomes a prophet, before he has the honor of interpreting dreams for a seemingly very important, invisible king, before he faces lions, he is first revealed as a young believer who chooses faithfully, not only when everything is okay, when everything is easy, but because it is the right thing to do, regardless of the cost. This is why our title is Faithful to God in Jerusalem and in Babylon. And this opening chapter of the book of Daniel reminds us that wherever God places his people or us, faithfulness is possible, and that such faithfulness brings blessing, purpose, and even joy for those who accept to be faithful. The first part of my text is about everything that was lost, verse 1 and 2. The first two verses state, in the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and took him completely. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand. Daniel chapter 1 begins with words that are difficult to accept. The enemy surrounds Jerusalem. The holy city is defeated. What a tragedy. There is no longer a holy land, no longer a temple, no longer the pride of the inhabitant of Jerusalem. As the prophet Jeremiah said in his writing, and he said it very painfully, how lonely sits the city that was full of people. How like a widow is she who was great among the nations. What a beautiful glory of Jerusalem. She weeps bitterly in the night. Her tears are on her cheeks. Lamentations 1, verse 1 and 2. From a human perspective, this looks like total failure. It appears as if God has abandoned his people. But then comes even more challenging, catastrophic statement. The phrases are very hard to accept. And the Lord gave. It means that God agreed to put Jerusalem into a big trouble. The Bible does not say that Babylon won because it was stronger. It does not say that Jerusalem simply lost the battle. The text affirms something much deeper. The Lord gave. This statement forces us to confront a profound and difficult truth. This text reminds us of the power of the prophetic words. Even in moments of defeat, God remains sovereign. And God said, I told you in advance, please listen to my words. God is not surprised by exile. He is not powerless before empires. He is still directing history, even when his people do not understand what is happening. The proof that this is the message of the Bible is found in the work of the prophets. God did not remain silent. He sent repeated warning, calling his people to change, to return, to repent. For example, the prophet Jeremiah was constantly proclaiming, reform your ways and your actions, and I will cause you to dwell in this beautiful place. The problem is that this speech in front of the temple was not heard. They heard the prophet saying something, but nothing changed in the life of the people of Israel. Unfortunately, the lesson was not learned and the call to repentance was ignored. And the army of Nebuchadnezzar destroyed what people believed would never fall. Dreams collapsed, security disappeared, and Jerusalem was lost. The message for us is clear. When life is full of sunshine, let us live in a way worthy of the privileges God has given us. When everything seems perfect, let us not misuse the opportunity to grow, to improve, to love better, and to become people with the right values. May we preserve the blessings of God through a faithful and through obedient attitude worthy of God's children. We were created for something big. We were created for Jerusalem, not for Babylon. Let us always live worthy of that calling. Number 2 of my presentation, the brainwashing process. After Jerusalem is conquered, Babylon does not stop with military victory. We said that Jerusalem fell totally, completely. The king Nebuchadnezzar is in control of everything. But no, he continues with his long-term strategy. He understands something very important: to control people. It is not to conquer their land. You must shape their thinking, their values, their identity. And Daniel chapter 1 tells us that the king ordered his officials to bring some of the young men of Judah into his service, the best of the best. young men in whom there was no blemish, good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge, and quick to understand. It is so different. I see for myself how many times I understand, but very slowly. It takes time, but he wanted the best. People who had ability to serve in the king's palace. These were not ordinary captives. They were the best of the nation, intelligent, capable, and full of potential. Babylon does not want to destroy these young people. Babylon wants to reset them according to the Babylonian pattern. Verse 4 also tells us that these young men were to be taught the literature of Chaldeans, instructed in the Babylonian way of thinking, in Babylonian language, trained for service in the royal court. This was not accidental. It was carefully designed long-term process. Step by step, Babylon wanted all of them to think in the way of Babylon. Babylon removed them from their past, immersed them in a new worldview. This is why we can speak of a brainwashing process, not through violence or force, but through education. And this is essential. You can do a lot of things when you impose education. Babylon's educational system was advanced and impressive, the best of this time. It included science, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, and administration. But there was one essential problem. In this educational system, there was no place for the true God, the God of the Bible. No place for him. Education without God does not produce wisdom. It produces skills, but often results in blind obedience and pride in belonging to what is considered the greatest kingdom in the world. This is why the Babylonian method was so dangerous. Their plan was not only that these young men would learn carefully, but they wanted that their mind changes. They gave them selected information, but they wanted a Babylonian way of thinking and believing. This reminds us of an important reality. Education is never neutral. True education is always having God in the center. God-focused education is a blessing. Then you have values, you have priorities, you have identity. Let us also mention the final step in this life-transforming process, the change even of names. Daniel, whose name means God is my judge, became Belshazzar. Hananiah, the Lord is gracious, became Shadrach. Michael, who is like God, became Meshach. And Azariah, the Lord helps. All God-centered names. The last one, Azariah, became Abednego. Every reference to the God of Israel was removed. Every new name honored Babylonian gods. The message was clear. Your God is no longer your reference. Your God doesn't define who you are. But scriptures quietly show us something powerful. Babylon could change even the name of God's children, but it could not change their faith could not change their mindset. Daniel chapter 1 speaks directly to our world today. We may not live in Babylon, but Babylon lives in our culture. Values are redefined. Truth is questioned. You have everywhere fake news. And you start to doubt, what is the truth? Faith is pressured, not through persecution, but through assimilation. The process is often slow and subtle, but the goal is the same: to replace faith with comfort and conviction with ease. The question remains deeply relevant. Who shapes our thinking? God or the culture around us? Jerusalem or Babylon? Do not forget, Babylon changed the environment. Babylon imposed the education. Babylon changed the names. But for Daniel and his friends, one thing remained untouched. Their heart remained the same, and God was in the center of their life. The third part of my presentation is the courage to choose God. Verse 8 to 16. After the pressure of Babylon's system, the education, and the change of identity, the narrative slows down and focuses on one decisive moment. There is the entire system working together to modify, to transform a people. But the text says, but Daniel, among all of them, in this process of changing the mind, Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. This is verse 8. This verse is the spiritual turning point of the entire chapter. There is no public protest, no rebellion, no confrontation. There is only a quiet, firm decision taken after deep reflection on God's plan for Daniel's life. Daniel does not begin by changing Babylon. He begins by guarding his own heart. The text says that Daniel purposed in his heart, not in his emotion, not through calculation, not under pressure, but with conviction. This teaches us something essential. True faithfulness is always internal before it becomes visible. There is first inner decision, and then everything will become different. Daniel decides whom he belongs to before he decides what he will eat. At first glance, you will say, the issue may seem minor. Why should food matter so much? But the king's food represented more than nutrition. It symbolized dependence on Babylon, participation in pagan practices, and even, we can say, acceptance of a new system of loyalty. By refusing the king's food, Daniel was not in itself rebellious. He was not a difficult guy. He was declaring his primary allegiance to God. Faithfulness is often tested not in dramatic moments, but in daily, ordinary choices. Notice how Daniel handles the situation. He doesn't organize a pressure or protest. He does not attack the system. He does not insult the authority. He respectfully asks for an alternative and in a constructive way. Faithfulness does not require arrogance. Conviction does not require disrespect. Daniel knows what he wants, and he is sure of the superiority of his convictions. And this is why the Bible tells us, now God has brought Daniel into the favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs. So this is the key of the success. Daniel can only have inner conviction, and God is preparing everything else. Clearly, God works not only in Daniel's heart, but also in the hearts of those around him. Daniel proposes a test, 10 days with vegetables and water. This is not manipulation, it is trust. He knew that with this diet, he will be okay. Daniel places himself entirely in God's hand. At the end of the test, the results are clear. Daniel and his friends appear healthier and stronger. Daniel chapter 1 reminds us that compromise often appears harmless. Small choices, private decisions, moments when no one seems to be watching. But in reality, these are the moments when character is formed. Daniel teaches us that it is possible to live faithfully, even in Babylon, without withdrawing from society, without becoming aggressive, without losing integrity, even if it is necessary. Vegetables and water. This was not his diet in Jerusalem. He had a lot of opportunity to enjoy good food, but it gave him the opportunity to stay faithful, to be loyal. And Daniel's faithfulness ultimately propelled him to the highest positions of the Babylonian kingdom. Part 4 is 10 times better. We now understand that Daniel made his decision quietly, but its impact was powerful, especially in the way God responded. Daniel did not defend himself. The texts affirm God had brought Daniel into favor and goodwill of his supervisor. The emphasis is clear. God will prepare the way. God will be on our side when we are faithful. It is true that God gave Jerusalem into Babylon's hand, but verse 17 underlines another important truth. God gave to Daniel and his friends knowledge and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. In other words, God prepared him for the big task in the future, for the chapter 2 of Daniel, to meet the King of the King. They received the wisdom beyond their mandatory education. They received discernment, which means Daniel and his friend beyond human ability. Moreover, Daniel was able to interpret vision and clearly communicate the divine message behind them. Because God had given this gift to the 4 young men, the examination before the king was extremely successful. After the interview, the Bible says, the king found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers in his entire realm. The message is clear. It is possible to succeed without compromising, because God gives success. Faithfulness to God will not isolate us. It will prepare us for meaningful influence. God does not call his people to be average. He calls them to be faithful, and faithfulness leads to excellence. Faithfulness has consequences, not always immediate, but always meaningful and always a blessing in experience. This is the title of my part 5, Long-Term Blessing. This is the last verse of the first chapter, verse 21. The chapter ends with a simple but powerful statement. Thus Daniel continued until the first year of King Cyrus. If Daniel was brought to Babylon around 605 BC, and King Cyrus conquered Babylon in 539 BC, this verse covers approximately 66 years of history. Even after the fall of Babylon, the prophet continued to serve in high positions through a long-term blessing from God. Daniel remained faithful through different kings, changing empires and shifting cultures. And so, Daniel chapter 1 brings us back to the question we asked at the beginning. Can a person remain faithful to God in Jerusalem and in Babylon? The answer is, of course, yes, only by God's grace. God is present in times of loss. God is active amid cultural pressure. God honors quiet obedience. Daniel teaches us that faithfulness is not about location, position, or comfort. It is about putting God first and trusting Him to take care of everything else. May we also imitate Daniel. May we remain faithful to God in all circumstances. May we be His children, both in Jerusalem and in Babylon. We will be blessed.